Good afternoon, class. Welcome to this session of in this session of strategic financial management. In our last session, we discussed regarding capital structure, optimum capital structure, the factors which influence the determinants of capital structure, the patterns of capital structure, and also we started with the different kind of capital structure theory. And uh, we also discussed regarding some of the assumptions that are to be made in capital structure theory. Now we discussed that there are mainly four kinds of capital structure theories that would be considered, which are being regarded as net income approach, net operating income approach, traditional approach, and Modigliani and Miller approach. And also we said that the capital structure decision should always be examined or should always be analyzed from the point of view of how it is going to impact on the value of the firm. Now, if it all the impact is that the capital structure decision can affect a firm's value, then it is always said that it would like to have a capital structure which maximizes its market value. But for this, there always existing conflict theories which studies the relationship between the capital structure and the value of the firm. Now, speaking of the four different things, the traditionalists believe that capital structure affects the firm's value, while the Miller and Modigliani model, under the assumption of perfect market capital and that there are no taxes present, they argue that the capital structure decision is irrelevant. Now, the ideology of theory reverses when they assume that there is no perfect capital and that there are taxes. Now, this tax is being considered as important because tax savings, which results from interest paid on the debt, creates value for the firm. However, the tax advantage of debt would be reduced by personal taxes and also sometimes by financial distress. Hence, the trade off between cost and benefit of debt can turn capital structure into a relevant decision. Now, we also considered what are the general assumptions that are to be made. That is, starting with that there are only two kinds of funds that would be employed by any of the organizations. That is, they would accept either debt or equity, and there are no any kinds of other capital funds. To be specific, there aren't any preference shares either. And the second main assumption is that there are no any corporate tax. Now this stands, but then later in the theory, they have removed it. And now whatever the firms earn, the third assumption is that all the earnings would be given as dividend and the company does not have any kind of retained earnings. And it is also said that the firm's total assets, that is to tell the entire value of the firm, would be given and it will not change during the life of the company. And also that whatever investment decision the organization takes, it is assumed that it is going to be constant. And the next assumption that they take is that the firm's total financing, it remains to be constant. That is to tell the way the portion of the debt and equity might change, but the amount to gather, that is to tell, if today 5 lakh is the entire financing of the company, then the 5 lakh is going to remain constant for the entire life of the organization. But the portion how this 5 lakh would be divided, that is maybe 50% equity, 50% debt, or 60% equity and 40% debt, that proportion changes, but the total amount tends to remain constant. And also that the earning before interest and tax, or what we call as operating earning, it is expected that there is no any changes or there is no any growth. And also that the risk of the business remains constant, and also that the risk is independent of capital structure and financial risk. And it is also assumed that the company has a perpetual life or it has a continuous life. Now, regarding the investor, the assumption is that all the investors, they have the same objective probability about the distribution of the future and the expected operating earnings for a given firm. And we also discussed regarding notions, especially where we would be using some of the notations when we solve the equation, wherein S would be regarded as total market value of the equity, B would be regarded as the total market value of the debt, I represent the interest payment that has been made, and V represents the total market value of the firm. And the cost of debt is represented by Ki of Kd. And the cost of equity would be represented by Ke. Now, having said that, now it becomes important to understand the different capital structure theory. And the first among that is net income approach. Now, net income theory or net income approach as a theory was given by a person called as Durant. And according to net income approach, it is said that the capital structure decisions are relevant to the valuation of the firm. That is to tell, based on the proportion of the debt and equity, the value of the firm also tends to changes. Or in other words, there would be, change in the financial leverage will lead to a corresponding change in the overall cost of capital. And as well as, because there is change in the overall cost of capital, there would be change in the total value of the firm also. Now, once again, I would repeat. Now, the net income approach, it tells that the decisions of the capital structure are relevant in the valuation of the firm. That is to tell, that whenever there is a change in the financial leverage, it will change the overall cost of capital, and because the overall cost of capital changes, there will be change in the total value of the firm. Now, moving forward, if at all the degree of financial leverage is increased, what happens is the weighted average cost of capital will decrease. Now, this degree of financial leverage uh, is usually measured by debt and equity. Now, there can be an increase in degree of financial leverage when debt in the entire capital structure is increased, then it would increase the degree of financial leverage. So, whenever it is increased, the weighted average cost of capital will decline, and when the weighted average cost of capital declines, the value of the firm as well as the market value of the ordinary shares will increase. Now, to put that in simple words, it simply means that now in a company there are two kinds of capital, by using which the entire capital structure of the company would be built on. And according to the assumption, it is only either debt or equity. Now, there would be an increase in financial leverage whenever there would be increase in the debt portion in the overall capital structure of the company. And as a result of increase in the debt, what happens is the cost of capital of the company decreases, and when the cost of capital decreases, the value of the company increases, and as a result, it increases the value of the market value of ordinary shares, or vice versa. Or vice versa is to tell, if at all the debt portion is decreased in the overall capital structure, it would result in increased cost of capital of the entire organization, and thereby the value of the firm decreases, and when the value of the firm decreases, it tends to result in decrease in the ordinary share of the company. Now, this is the idea what net income approach gives us. It tells that the capital structure decisions are relevant when we take into consideration the valuation of the firm. How it is relevant is that when the degree of leverage increases, the overall cost of capital decreases, and thereby results in increase in the value of the firm, and when the value of the firm increases, it would be resulting in the equity share prices going to maximum. Or if at all the financial leverage decreases, or in simple words, the debt proportion in the entire capital structure decreases, it would result in increasing the overall cost of capital, which would in turn result in decreasing the value of the firm and thereby decreasing the market value of share. Now, there are general assumptions for all the theories together, and there are some of the assumptions specifically for each of the theory. Now, for net income approach, we can three assumption in particular. That is, first one, there are no any kinds of tax. So, whenever you solve a problem, you might come across or you may not come across the tax factor. So, it is always, better that whatever you consider, you will have to give a footnote for each of the problem when you solve it. Now, that there are no tax is the first assumption that net income approach makes. The second one is that the cost of debt is less than cost of equity. Now, these are the two kinds of capital that a company uses in its capital structure. On one hand, we have debt, on one hand, we have equity. Now, each sources of capital will be having its own cost. But then it is considered that the cost of debt would be less compared to that of cost of equity. And the third assumption is that the use of debt will not change the risks or the perception of the investor. Now, why have they mentioned perception of investor in particular? Because in reality or in market, what happens beyond a certain level, whenever the company uses only debt as an instrument to raise the capital, what the general public assume is that the company is in such a situation where it has no option to go and call for equity shares, or in other words to tell that people do not believe or people do not have faith in the organization. That's why there are no any investor who would be ready to invest in the company, and as a result the company has no other option than to go only for debt as an instrument to raise the capital. Now that would be the general perception. But then The net income approach theory assumes that no matter how much a company uses debt in its capital structure, the use of the debt is not going to change the perception of the investor. And for the matter, it will also consider that there is no change in the cost of equity or in the cost of capital. Now, it is important to understand the implication and also the result of NI approach or the result of net income approach. Now, the implication simply tells that how the theory has been made or what is the base idea of the theory. Now, if at all we take into consideration the implications, especially of the three assumptions, which is the underlying foundation of the net income approach, it tells that whenever the degree of leverage increases. Now, whenever we tell that degree of leverage increase, it simply means in the entire capital structure, the debt portion is increased. So, according to the implication, the when as the degree of leverage increases, the proportion of a cheaper source of fund, that is the debt in the capital structure, it tends to increase. And as a result, what happens is the weighted average cost of capital would be decreased. Or in simple words, the cost of capital tends to decrease. So as we said, when debt proportion is increased, the cost of capital increases and it leads to an increase in the total value of fund. It happens simply because when the cost of capital or in a layman terms, the expenses, when the expenses become less, there would be more profit in the hand. And that's how the total value of the firm increases. With the cost of debt and also the cost of equity being equal, what happens is the increased use of debt or the increased leverage will only magnify or will only increase the shareholders' earnings and thereby the market value of the holding share also increases. Now, that is all increase. Now, speaking regarding the results of the NI, the final level or the debt proportion or the debt increase in the capital structure. Now you always have to remember why Mexico approaches so much of importance for debt. Because the main assumption of the net income approach is that the cost of capital and the cost of debt are one and the same. That is to tell, if at all 60% of debt, if at all the situation is like that there are some situations. In situation A company has taken 60% of debt and 40% of equity. While on the other hand, in situation B, the company has taken 60% of equity and 40% of debt. Okay? Now each of this has its own cost. The capital has its own cost of expenses have to be made when the company use different kinds of capital in this capital. Now, having assumed the thing that cost of debt and cost of equity are the same, the overall cost of capital of both the companies, of both the situations, the A situation, is going to be same because of the assumption that the cost of equity and the cost of debt remains constant. So whenever the debt cost is increased, it is always said it is the fact that debt as a capital instrument is less expensive than equity. So what happens is when the rate is fixed, whenever you think the cheaper source of debt, it will only result in the overall cost of capital becoming less. Or in other words, the expenses are being less. So you have more money in hand now. And when you have more amount, the value of increase. And therefore, the first result it tells that the financial leverage or the debt on the capital, according to this particular approach, is an important variable to the capital structure of the firm. And it will also tell that whenever a company has a judicial reserve, or in other words, whenever a company tries to understand all its options, analyzes, and comes up with a portion of debt and equity, which would be most helpful for the organization, or in other words, which would be having less cost of capital on the one hand, and on the other hand, which increases the value of company to the highest. We can recall what is known as optimum capital structure. Now, even here, there are chances some of the clauses might not use debt at all in its capital structure. So whenever that happens, or if at all the firm does not use debt in its financial revenue, or if the financial revenue is zero, the overall cost of capital will definitely be equal to the equity capital allocation revenue. Now, the weighted average cost of capital will always decline and will approach to the cost of debt as the degree of leverage reaches the point what is called as one. all the net income. Now, net income refers to the single capital is very sense that the capital structure are relevant to the valuation of the firm, and it tells how the decision is made. Now, the decision is important because whenever a company because in the leverage, the overall cost of capital tends to be, and it would result in the increase of the price. Coming up with this, it assumes things like there are no tax, that the cost of debt increase, the cost of equity, that there are no consumption or redemption made from part of investment regarding the of debt. So now it becomes important that we study some of the practical uh, problems regarding this particular thing. Now, first it is important to understand the question. Even in your examination, what happens is only the person what will display in the same mind has been given. Now you wouldn't know from which person it is, even though if you can decide from which particular lesson the person is, you will definitely have to decide on which theory the particular lesson has been given. Now, it is difficult not because, it is very simple. It is difficult because from all the chapters, the question would be resembling the same. So you will have to, in the beginning, even before trying to solve the particular question, you will have to understand from which particular chapter the question is asked and under which construct field. Now, having said that, the first question is that how will now X limited earn a profit of rupees 20 the and before providing for interest and tax. The company's capital structure is as follows. 4 lakh equity shares of rupees 10 each. Its market capitalization is 16%. 25,000, 14% secured redeemable debentures of rupees 150. You are required to calculate the value of the loan under the account and also calculate the overall cost of the no. You have to consider what are the things that is given specifically in the question and what the question. Now they have been given that the name of the company is X Limited Company. and that becomes 20 lakhs. Now we have to see, now we have to see what this 20 lakhs is. Now what kind of profit it is? Now they have mentioned 20 lakhs for interest and tax. So simply this particular 20 lakhs would be represented earning before interest and tax or EBIT. Now, once after we understand, the next thing that is being mentioned is how the capital structure of the company is, or what are the kinds of funds the company uses to raise the capital. And the first thing is that they are using equity. The equity shares they have of the amount or now the four they have been given in terms of rupees 10 each share. So it will say 40,000 equity shares one day and each value is 10. And the value of the entire equity capital structure is 4 lakh. And the second component in the capital structure is debt. Here, what is the form of debt the company has? Here, it is in the form. Now, here it is in the form of secured redeemable debt. Now, the secured redeemable debt is nothing but the debt component of the capital structure of X and yes, we have debt in the form of secured redeemable debentures. Now, secured redeemable debentures we have in number 25,000. Now, this 25,000, each of the debenture bond is of the value rupees 150 each. So 25,000 into multiplied by 150 would be making up almost 37 lakhs 50,000 the entire capital structure, and along with that we have 4 lakh of equity shares of rupees 10 each. That would make up 40 lakh. And we also have to understand what is the percentage of equity, I mean debt. Now this particular debt is of 14%. Now, having given so much of information, we'll have to now find out the value of the firm and also we have to find out what is the overall cost of capital. That particular thing we shall find in our next session. For our this particular session,